The steel door slammed shut behind him with a sound that could stop a heartbeat. Clang. The noise echoed down the hallway before fading into the endless hum of machines. Inside, David Ramirez stood completely still. His new cell was small, just 8 by 10 feet. The walls were concrete gray, smooth but cold, like the inside of a refrigerator. In the corner sat a thin bed, a metal sink, and a toilet bolted to the wall. There was no color, no sound, no smell, just silence. That silence was what made ADX Florence different. It wasn't the cameras or the layers of steel. It was the quiet. The kind that made you hear your own heartbeat and wonder if you were going crazy. David sat down on the edge of his bed and looked around. His entire world was right here, 4 walls and a small window slit too high to see out of. He could tell it was morning only because a faint beam of light hit the floor near his feet. He had already spent 3 years here, and he knew the schedule by heart. The guards didn't have to say a word. The day started at 6 a.m. with breakfast. The slot in the door opened, metal scraping against metal. A tray slid through, eggs, bread, and a plastic cup of milk. No one spoke. No footsteps lingered. The slot closed again. He picked up the tray and took a bite of the cold eggs. Every sound he made felt too loud. The scrape of the fork, the sound of his swallow, even the creak of the bed frame. That's how it went. 23 hours in the same room. 1 hour outside in a cage. That's it. To most people, that would sound like punishment. To David, it was worse. It was forgetting. Forgetting what voices sounded like. Forgetting the smell of rain. Forgetting what it felt like to be touched. He looked up at the vent near the ceiling. It was his only connection to the outside. Through it came the steady hum of air and sometimes faint sounds. Talking. Scratching. Tapping. He had heard them before, strange rhythms coming through the walls. Some said the prisoners talked to each other using Morse code. Others said the sounds were just the building itself shifting. But David wasn't sure anymore. At exactly 8 a.m., the lights above him flickered twice, signal for inspection. A guard's voice came through the intercom. Ramirez, stand at the door. He stood up and faced forward. The small window in his door darkened for a second as a shadow passed. The voice came again. All clear. That was it. Inspection done. He sat back down and picked up a book from the small shelf near his bed, The Count of Monte Cristo. He had read it 6 times. A story about a man trapped in a cell, planning escape. Every time he finished it, he'd start again. It was the only story that made him feel like he wasn't alone. At noon, the lunch tray arrived. The same metal clatter. This time, beans and rice. He ate slowly, staring at the same corner he always did. But then, something new. The vent hummed louder for a moment, then quieted. After that came tapping. Tap, 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 tap. He froze. 3 short taps, a pause, then 2 quick ones. He had heard that same rhythm months ago during outdoor rec time, when another inmate was taken back early. Nobody knew why, but the sound stayed in his head ever since. David leaned forward, his ear close to the vent. The tapping came again. He whispered, "Who's there?" No response. He waited. Then came one more tap, just one. He backed away from the wall, heart pounding. It wasn't his imagination. Someone, or something, was trying to reach him. When evening came, the guards called for recreation. He stood as the door unlocked. Hands through the slot. Cold cuffs bit into his wrists. 2 guards escorted him down the corridor. Every 20 feet, a gate opened and closed behind them. No other voices, no other movement. The yard was nothing like the movies. It was a concrete square surrounded by high walls and metal mesh overhead. No trees. No grass. Just sky, a small slice of gray-blue fading into dusk. He walked in slow circles, stretching his arms. Across from him, in another cage, someone else moved, a tall man with a shaved head. David couldn't see his face clearly, but the man looked up at the sky the same way he did. Then it happened again. Tap, 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 tap. This time, it came from across the yard. David looked at the man. The stranger lowered his hand slowly, brushing it against the concrete wall, as if finishing a signal. Before David could respond, a voice barked through a loudspeaker. Time's up. He was cuffed again and led back inside. That night, when the lights dimmed, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the tapping, about how the man across the yard knew that same pattern. When he finally stood up to look at the vent again, he saw something that made his stomach twist. Fresh marks scratched into the wall beneath it. 5 deep lines. He reached out to touch them, but before his fingers met the concrete, the intercom crackled. Ramirez, a low voice said, distorted and slow, "Don't answer the walls." David froze. The voice wasn't one he recognized, and there was no camera light on. Then, just as suddenly, the power went out. The lights flickered once, then everything went black. For a moment, David thought it was a dream. But the silence that followed was too heavy, too real. The steady hum of the vent had stopped, and without it, the air in the cell felt still, almost thick. He sat frozen on the edge of his bed, trying to listen through the darkness. Then came a sound, a faint metallic click near the vent. Not loud, but sharp enough to echo. Tip, 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 tip. That same rhythm again. The same one from the yard. The same one he couldn't forget. "Who are you?" David whispered. No answer. He took a slow breath and stood up. His hands trembled as he reached for the vent. "If you can hear me, do it again." Another pause. His heart thudded against his ribs. Someone was there. On the other side. But how? He leaned closer to the vent, his cheek almost brushing the metal. "What do you want?" he asked softly. For a moment, there was nothing. Then a whisper came through the darkness. It wasn't clear or steady, more like a breath mixed with static. But he caught one word. "Count." David froze. "Count what?" No response. He backed away slowly, feeling his way along the wall until he sat back on the bed. The darkness felt alive now, like something was moving in it, something he couldn't see. Then, as if nothing had happened, the lights came back on. The cell looked the same. The same bed. The same concrete walls. The same tray from earlier, still sitting by the door. But one thing was different. The scratches under the vent weren't 5 anymore. There were 6. And this time, they were carved deeper, almost as if made with something sharp. David stepped closer, staring at them. His hand shook. He pressed his palm against the wall, cold as ice. The intercom clicked suddenly, making him jump. A voice came through, calm and steady. "Ramirez, remain on your bunk. Do not approach the door." It was the control officer. The usual one. David almost laughed out loud in relief. "Sir, something's happening in here. Someone's—" "Ramirez," the voice interrupted, "no one is near your cell." "Yes, there is. Someone's in the vents." Silence. Then the officer said, "The vents are sealed. Go back to bed." The line went dead. David stared at the intercom, unsure if he should scream or laugh. He turned back toward the vent, and that's when he saw it. The metal grate wasn't flat anymore. The screws on one corner had been loosened. Just slightly, but enough for him to notice. He stepped closer, his pulse racing. "Who's doing this?" he whispered. A shadow flickered past the vent opening. He stumbled backward, hitting the bed frame hard. "Who's there?" Nothing. Just the low hum returning through the air ducts. The light flickered again, dimmer this time. David sat for what felt like hours, staring at the vent. Eventually, exhaustion won. He lay down, eyes open, afraid to blink. When the morning announcement finally echoed through the speaker, "Breakfast distribution commencing," he felt like he hadn't slept at all. The tray slot opened with its usual metallic clank. The smell of oatmeal drifted in. But something else came with it. Paper. A small folded note sat beside the food. He hesitated before picking it up. The handwriting was rough, almost carved into the paper by force. 3 words. "Count the marks." He looked at the vent. 6 scratches. He unfolded the note again, flipping it over. On the back, written faintly, "When they reach 23, you'll understand." His heart started pounding. He didn't know who sent it, or how it had even gotten onto his tray. No one at ADX Florence could pass notes. Every meal came sealed. Every door watched. He looked up at the camera in the corner of his cell. The red light was off again. That's when the realization hit him: he wasn't being watched anymore. He was being studied. Hours passed like minutes. He tried to distract himself by reading, pacing, anything. But every time he glanced at the wall, he swore the scratches looked different. Slightly deeper, slightly more defined. By evening, he counted again. There were 7. He didn't make them. He hadn't even touched the wall. That night, when the lights dimmed, he sat upright on his bunk, staring at the vent. He whispered to himself, "It's not real. It's not real. It's just my head." The intercom crackled once more. The same calm voice spoke, but this time it wasn't distorted. It was soft, almost human. "Lights out in cell 407. The sound of metal sliding echoed through the vent. The air stopped. The hum died again. And through the silence, David heard a whisper right beside his ear. Inside the cell, not the vent. 7 down. 16 to go. The lights shut off completely. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. And for the first time since he arrived at ADX Florence, David realized what 23 hours in a cell really meant. It wasn't the silence. It wasn't the loneliness. It was the waiting, because in this place, even the walls had a schedule. And they were counting.